This episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents is brought to you by Kvetch, who let the community vote on which game we should review, and they voted Swords of the Serpentine. Thank you for supporting the Kickstarter, and enjoy the episode.
This is Ludonarrative Dissidents, a podcast about tabletop role-playing games, how they're made and how they're played. Over the next hour, 3 experienced game designers, Ross Payton, Greg Stolze, and me, James Wallace, will field strip a game or supplement, discussing how it works, how players use it, and what we can learn from it. Read show notes for each episode on our website, www.ludonarrativedissidents.com, where you can also join our Discord server, and find links to our library of previous episodes. But for the moment, enjoy this episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents.
Hello, and welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 24, Swords of the Serpentine, a gumshoe-powered swords and sorcery, investigative, heroic, fantasy, adventure RPG, co-written by Kevin Culp and Emily Dresner, published by Gumshoe Games. This game came out in 2021 and is a change of pace for the Gumshoe system for most of its system games.
Gumshoe's part of Pelgrane, let's just jump in and make that clear as well.
That's true.
They're neighbours of mine, I have to say that.
That's true. Unlike most Gumshoe system games, this is not a horror game. Now, they have had a couple other non-horror games, Bubble Gumshoe and Time Watch. This has horrific elements in it, but this is Swords and Sorcery. This is Conan and Farford and the Grey Mouser getting into shenanigans in the city of Eversink. And this is actually a rare game in that we've all played it because, as you will listen to in our actual play episode coming up in 1 or 2 episodes, Kevin Culp, the game's co-writer, created an adventure for us, and we ran through and we had a delightful time. So yes, but Greg, you were saying?
I was saying Kevin Culp was the one who reminded us that it is not Swords of the Serpentine, Americans. It's Swords of the Serpentine. I feel I can promise with some confidence that I will get that wrong at some point in this podcast. So in advance, my apologies, Kevin.
So take a drink now. I've played the game, but take and finish the bottle because Greg and James have both played it as well. Yeah.
Also, it uses will 512 times.
Yep.
And 92 of Yule. My gospel is spreading because when we started the game, Kevin was like, yeah, I thought I didn't use the future tense that much. And then I looked at it. And so I'm like, yes, each one, teach one. Come on.
Well, some of those are probably, the use of will as an attribute, plus people name will in the playtester section probably. It is a 396-page book, so.
It is a fat bastard.
There's only a little over one will per page, just 1.1 or whatever.
But
James,
too many.
Yes. What are your additional thoughts of Swords of the Serpentine?
It's interesting because on the face of it, it's a big ask to take the Gumshoe system, which was specifically designed for investigative role-play in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, in the style of Call of Cthulhu, but with better investigation mechanics, fundamentally, and apply it to rollicking, humorous fantasy adventures. You mentioned Conan, but specifically in the Fritz Lieber Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser style, which has been aped and built on many, many times. I'm thinking of the Thieves' World series by Roger Asprin, which very famously became a Chaosium licensed box set in the early 80s, which was critically lauded. People absolutely loved it, and it was brilliant. Very much the same idea. Take this fantasy setting, this city filled with skullduggery, and turn it into a setting with all the locations and the NPCs. Of course, that's building on an earlier work. Kevin and Emily's work is, so far as I know, unique to them, the setting of Eversink, this city that is perpetually just descending into the mud. It is forever sinking. But at the same time, what they've created, its roots are very obvious for the most part. They bring an original tone and taste to it. Their combination of elements is not quite the same as anyone else's.
Yeah, I did not find it quite as funny as I think you did.
I think it's kind of setting up humor, or it could just be that my preconception of this is a lot of the stories that tend to be set in this kind of city have, if not actually kind of laugh out loud humor, then there's at least a black comedy or a mordant huge, or, you know, that inevitability that things are going to go horribly wrong. And when they do, there is a level of humor to it. And certainly the playtest we had, there were some hilarious moments. I mean, some the oh God, what now moments, and some just, you know, when things go spectacularly well. It's a good system. I was genuinely surprised how well it captures that tone of heroic swashbuckling adventure. You know, mad stunts, doing improbable things because your character sheet says that you should be able to. I had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun reading the book as well. Just while I'm on this roll, while I've built up a head of steam, the territory has been visited many times in RPGs. There have been several licensed Lankmar books with a setting of the Fafard and the Grey Mouser. Stories, TSR did a pretty good one in the late 80s, I remember. I tried to track down my original review of that, couldn't find it. There's the Green Ronin Freeport series. The setting is very similar. And they do tend to be these coastal cities, usually built on islands with canals and bridges, which allows you to differentiate the districts really easily, but also allows for so much atmosphere and interesting monsters as well. In the 90s, we did Marienburg for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, written by Anthony Reagan, based on a series of articles that he and a number of others had written for White Dwarf back in the 80s. And again, these bridges and canal paths are well trodden, and it's a fruitful area for adventures because you have the best of any good city adventure. You've got districts, you've got rival power blocks, you've got the crime end, you've got the lower end, you've got the high end and the nobility and the very wealthy, and then you've got the mysterious and the sorceress and all the ones that we don't talk about, and probably foreigners as well, and who knows what they're getting up to. It's a perfect setting for role play. One does not come to this expecting anything enormously new in the genre, and I'm not sure that Swords of the Serpentine does anything terrifically new. What it does do, it does extremely well. That's okay, Pressy, I can go home now. I am home. What am I saying?
I think tea and off to bed.
One of the things I really like about this is the sort of iteration of the Gumshoe system being progressively, like, I've been playing Gumshoe since the beginning, since the first edition Trail of Cthulhu came out, and I've had a lot of fun with it, but I know the system's ups and downs pretty well. But seeing this iteration of the Gumshoe engine, it's the most robust and I think answers a lot of common problems that people have had with Gumshoe in the past. And part of that, I think, is because it's freed from the horror constraints. Like, horror is, you know, a genre of disempowerment, your character. And so there's this sort of push-pull between, like, we got to make things scary versus, like, my character can't do anything. This sucks. So, you know, Swords of the Serpentine resolves that pretty admirably. We had some very swashbuckling action scenes in our playtest game. Or not playtest, but just, you know, our actual play. I think the proof that there is a sense of humor in this setting is that the main religion of the island, the patron goddess, is a goddess of commerce. And so one of the ways you resolve sorcerer's corruption of a place is to do a business deal. If you do enough business deals at a place, you can cleanse a corrupted area. And I thought touches like that really proves that this game, like, it would be so easy. Oh, it's a god of the harvest or of life or fertility or whatever. You have to do something no business deals. That's holy here. That'll cure that evil necromancer's curse. You know. Plus,
of course, the goddess is the city, and the city is the goddess. Literally, they are the same thing. You are living within the body of the goddess by living in the city,
which
that's really nice,
intensely creepy.
Yeah, but in a good way.
I do not like Denari the goddess. Nope. I'm not comfortable with this.
There are some dark Lovecraftian elements, like in the sample adventure, there is a flesh tangle, which is a horrible undead abomination that is made from corpses melding into each other. So, like, there is some dark and squeaky stuff in here that you can lean into or lean away from.
My comment about Denari was, okay, so we've got this loving goddess of capitalism and commerce who dislikes charity. And I'm like, okay, all right, yes, this makes perfect sense to me. It is possible to have a society run on the pure profit motive where everyone's needs are met as long as there is divine intervention. So but they did miss the trick, because I'm like, the goddess of capitalism has a secret police and they're not called the Invisible Hands. Come on. It was right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
I mean, one thing I also do like about the setting, as we mentioned, or James mentioned, the island is sinking. It is called Eversink because it is ever sinking. Any RPG setting, fantasy setting, has to have like, here's a reason why dungeons exist. And I think that's a good one. Like, buildings keep sinking. You have to keep building new floors on them as your first floor becomes a basement. I really like that they have a very subtle but very direct way. Like, yes, that's why there's dungeons under the cities.
Extremely moist dungeons.
Yep. Again, going back to the horror element. So, yeah.
The forever damp.
So this game is, again, though, focused on investigative adventures, though. So, but yeah.
It is, to an extent, I would say it focuses more intrigue, and that in this way, it reveals something about the idea of intrigue gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because finding out someone's secret has always been a huge part of these political machination games. And I'm like, if Vampire the Masquerade, way back when we were all young and had dark hair,
or hair,
if it had been a game like this, where it's like, okay, everything is going to be, the main rules structure is going to be how you find out information about people. And, you know, also you can kick their asses and drink their blood or whatever, instead of being a generation or two away from Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, well, of course, the combat mechanic is going to be pretty central. How different would they have looked? The beginning of Vampire the Masquerade was, there wasn't a really evolved way to track favors. It was all just, if I remember correctly, in the edition with the mime on the back, it was all just sort of GM fiat and GM tracks. And here you have highly mechanized ways that, okay, this is what it means if you are on the outs with this Thieves Guild, but have friends with the Architects Guild. And here is specifically how those mechanics bop in. So yeah, I also liked it. It's hard to not like a game when one of the co-authors runs it for you. That's I'm not sure we got the same experience we would have if one of us had picked this up to run it, but
I think you're right. At the same time, I got a very real sense that this is not just a game that they wrote and then playtested. I think they playtested it and then thought a huge amount about the playtests and rewrote chunks of it and additional sections based on it. I mean, it kicks off with notes on streaming games online that you almost never see. I've just written a piece for Weird Science about how it's a two-part argument. First of all, when did we start saying TTRPG instead of RPG? And I won't spoil it for you. Go and read the bloody article. But the second part is, when did TTRPGs become so digital? Because almost without us noticing, we just assume VTT content is there for almost all systems and quite often part of Kickstarters, PDFs. I mean, we've been using computers as part of gaming since the early 80s. But more and more people are just... And it's a fact that as we get older, our free time and the ability to actually meet up in real life becomes harder and harder. I mean, heaven knows we have a hard enough time scheduling the podcast thing. And that's entirely online. Just finding a spare hour and a half in an afternoon or an evening to sit down and record this stuff.
Let alone doing it in a milieu where you have to be wearing pants, where they're mandatory.
Yeah. Yes, and other people as well. To actually have a section, I can't think of another game that has a section on how to run it online. I mean, I wrote one for The Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen in 2016, and it reads like it has been graven into a wax tablet with a stylus. It is 10 years old. It is completely out of date. It is just, nobody uses that software or those technologies anymore. Possibly if you were writing, text forum like Discord. But, online streaming, free multi-person calls are just so ubiquitous now. And it's front and center. That section comes really early in the book. And it shows that Kevin and Emily have really thought about how this game is going to be run, how it's going to be used, and how it's going to be used in the future as well. There's also, then you get into framing the game, and they talk about what sort of party are your player characters going to be? It doesn't just take a party is an agglomeration of the player characters that you have generated separately, and you're together because the adventure demands it. It requires you to come up with a reason, and backstory for you being together, which is great because immediately the GM has something to jump off and hang hooks on, and it's really useful. This is a book that has thought about how it is going to be used, how the game is going to be played, and cues up the GM and the players in a really interesting way, and a way that I think a lot of other RPG rulebooks could take lessons from.
I might be able to track that back through time for you a little bit, James. The idea of the narrative structure, or this is why your gang's together, was in Unknown Armies first edition something that John Tynes really wanted to include. He felt that the D&D thing of, you all meet in a bar is fine for D&D, but for anything set in the modern day or in a more character-driven structure, it can't carry the weight that you're all a bunch of strangers who are not loyal to one another. And where this came from for him was playing Masks of Nyarlathotep disastrously and constantly hemorrhaging player characters and having to replace investigators so that by the time they got to the last chapter, they'd ship of Theseus their entire party once or twice. And it's like, we don't know why this Tuvalu fisherman is still with us. He's thousands of miles from home, but he's decided he must fight the darkness by our side.
In my personal experience, we went from journalist and detective to gun runner and KGB assassin number 1 and KGB assassin number 2 by the end of Masks of Nyarlathotep because of that same reason. Yeah, it's just the attrition rate of that campaign, especially classic Call of Cthulhu rules, was pretty out there.
And other games, of a similar vintage, Chill, which was kind of the second great horror game. I have a huge soft spot for Chill, particularly the first edition, which got away from being Call of Cthulhu by being Gothic horror instead, and did a really nice job of it. But it simply said your player character is a member of SAVE, which is this mysterious organization dedicated to a Societas Argenti Vi Eternity, or the Eternal Society of the Silver Way, which is quite nice. And so you roll a new character, and it's how do they get involved? Well, they're a member of SAVE. It's just hand waving, but it fits.
And you can see the DNA flow right from there into Delta Green. It's like, completely. Our last guy is now a Shoggoth poop. Why do we have a new computer IT guy in the party? Because your handler sent him. And, the new guy's like, hi, I'm going to be doing IT for you guys. What happened to your last guy? Don't worry about it.
Oh, he went to the farm upstate.
Never happen.
Yeah. It's okay. He commented his code. Don't read the comments too closely.
Yeah, exactly.
But back to swords.
Yeah, so there is a lot of advice in Swords of the Serpentine for everything, as you point out, Jay. There's a huge number of designer side boxes, designer notes, and it starts out at the very beginning talking about like framing the game. How are your characters are as a group, and that's like the very first thing. So like it's a game that really thought about like how do I. And Kevin mentioned during, before we ran the game, like I wanted to make sure I can't come with every book. So like I needed to make sure people could run this without me being present. And I think this game is pretty admirable in the sheer amount of advice, quality advice too, for running this type of game, because as we've talked about before, running Gumshoe is a bit of an adjustment compared to other games because of the investigative ability stuff.
What I'll say about that is if you're used to, everything's going to be run off one system, that, like D&D, where it's like, okay, you're going to roll a D20 to do things, or you're going to take 20. The distinction between learning and doing can feel finicky, but I think it's a valid distinction that the distinction serves. It's like the distinction between mech combat and everything else in Lancer, which I've referenced a couple times because I'm like, no, this is doing it right. Is that if you have a mech game, then everything that's not mech game can kind of just be abstracted. It can be a little more gestural. There's intrigue and there's combat. And unlike most Gumshoe games, I feel that they're they're more co-equal.
Certainly when you get to the how to GM section, there's a huge amount on running combats and then a fairly huge amount on running investigation. The GM boxes, they're little kind of designer notes in sidebars. To me, this is absolute catnip. I love to know about why certain things were put together. But I think for general players as well, to understand why a particular rule is there or why a mechanic has been tweaked the way it has from the designer's perspective, whether it's something they came across in playtest or some part of the background that they wanted to emphasize through this, it's absolutely fantastic. And really not that many games do it. And I think of the ones we've looked at, particularly the ones we've looked at this season, the only one I can think of that also does it is Rifts, where Kevin Simbita leaps into the text at length to explain why Rifts needs no play balance or anything of the sort. And it is the moment, it's the looking behind the curtain.
I've known designers who used play balance and they were all cowards.
Oh, man.
And there's the quote for the episode. Thank you, Greg.
As an odd aside, the Detroit Institute of Arts, or there's a museum in Detroit that's having an exhibit on the world of Palladium games that's running until September, because they are, a Michigan, Detroit Institute, very long running company there. The difference between intrigue and investigation is a very interesting point, as you made, Greg. But because at a certain point, this is actually emulating a lot of film noir detective fiction, right? This is a seedy city with lots of secrets, and you're poking in the underbelly and dealing with a lot of classism. It talks about this the society of Eversink has everything from lowly thieves and criminals to high merchants or high nobles, and then striving middle class merchant families that are trying to overtake the nobles. So there's a lot of, I recently watched The Big Lebowski, and I realized you could do The Big Lebowski in Swords of the Serpentine. You just there was someone just broke into your house and stole your rug, dude, and that rug really tied the room together, and you just go off to figure that out.
In Swords of the Serpentine, it literally tied the room together.
Yeah, exactly. It's a magical rug. Yeah, you need to get your rug back, dude. But I think one of the ways you could tell this is they've really iterated, they've learned about how to make investigative abilities more interesting, I think, or more appropriate for the genre. The types of investigative abilities you have. I think my single favorite one is, there's two of them, and that's Ridiculous Luck and Prophecy as investigative abilities. Mm-hmm. These are great because these are such catch-all, I want some kind of, the thing is they really emphasize, if you have an investigative ability, you always get clues, you always get information for free, you don't have to spend to get that. You spend it to gain some other non-information, non-clue related advantage. Ridiculous Luck would be literally this enemy who's been hired to assassinate you. Yeah, your drinking buddy. So you could talk your way out of this fight. Prophecy, you see a bug crawling along the wall and you realize that's an omen, and you need to deal with it. I really like these investigative abilities. It stretches the luck. I'm just really lucky. How many characters have you seen in fiction that are just regular people that just have this improbable luck? They don't know anything. They're foolish characters. Shaggy, or characters like that, or the Big Lebowski, or not the dude. The dude has pretty good luck.
Did you ever see the TV show Strange Luck with, I think, who was the guy who was with Skeet Ulrich, I think, the dollar store Johnny Depp. And the premise was just that. This guy has, his luck is never, ever normal. He is always incredibly unfortunate or incredibly lucky. It's always 1 or 20 on his roll. And it's just, there's a scene after I think it got 2 seasons maybe, but there's a scene after we've seen this shtick in action for a while where a cop puts his name into his computer. He's like, wait a minute, you're wanted in questioning with a relation to a bank robbery in Albuquerque, but also a missing woman in Minnesota at the same time. You've been given commendations by the mayors of Cincinnati, Chicago, and Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, so you could do that kind of character in this game.
So, yeah. I want to get into the idea of simulation versus narrativism, in mysteries, because we have covered the whole spectrum. I made a little graph, right? And way over on the left side of simulationism, you have Delta Green, where it's like, this is going to emulate physics. There's no luck points, you maniac, you absolute fool. There's no luck in Delta Green. You are all very competent. And, but if you don't find the clue, well, then you should have just looked harder. And then on way out on the other end of the spectrum in narrativism land is Brindlewood Bay, where it's like, yes, the mystery will unfold and you will discover the mystery and we will discover the mystery together, because the mystery's not in the text and the mystery's not in the GM's mind. The mystery is the old ladies we met along the way. And that it is that the difference between Delta Green's approach is, the mystery is there, and whether you figure it out or not, that's your job. And the Brindlewood Bay approach is there is a feeling of mysteriousness that can be evoked in the absence of an actual structure, which we can just backfill the structure after we have evoked the sensation. So those are my polls, right? And I feel like Swords of the Serpentine is right between the uprights. It's like Delta Green in that there is an expectation of actual structure, of a pre-planned set of events, mysteries, secrets to uncover. But it is like Brindlewood Bay in its narrativism of how you get there, how you get to the end. Particularly with the sorcery and corruption, right? The rules for this are pretty simple and mathy, and you can find out this much or do this much damage or have these pretty limited number of rules effects. But the chrome is all over the place. And, you want to be a bird wizard and you want to get to the top of those steps by transforming into a flock of birds and flying up there. Go ahead, go nuts. Look, Ma, no edge cases. It's not like simulationist magic in Dungeons & Dragons where you had engineers playing the game saying, well, if you pop that fireball in there, it would suck out all the oxygen, because a fireball of that size, man, it's going to do a lot. And so then we can just go in and kill the dragon while it's drowsy from lack of oxygen, which, on one hand is kind of hilarious, and if that's fun for you and you want to be Poul Anderson's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, terrific. But I don't think it was what anybody had in mind when they were writing those spell descriptions, because they were shaggy stoned English majors, not engineers.
Well, not engineering textbook word problems.
The thing is that they were wargamers. They were thinking about it in terms of the amount of space that spell effect's going to take up on a map. And, how many little lead miniatures are going to get caught in that circle when you drop the template on top of it. Or, I think that's what they were thinking about. They were not thinking about it in terms of 3-dimensional space and people who were going to take it to the logical extreme, because I don't think that mindset had quite been applied to games yet. I think that was something that came in with D&D and its camp followers. That idea of how can we think about this as if it was a real world, with real volumes and real effects. And if it's in the book, it's true. I can't remember the details, but I do remember having to work out that a fireball applied to a series of rat dungeons would fill a third of a mile of tunnels, if you just assume that atmospheric pressure is equal throughout, And it was a lovely way to pass a few minutes. It was an intellectual exercise.
Right, exactly.
Pretend it felt realistic. And in no way it was.
There is a fun to that kind of word problem solving. If you have a dragon going east at 30 miles an hour and you have a fireball going west at 180 miles an hour, what is the impact damage? Solve for Y. Yeah. But this is not that kind of game. This is a game that is very focused on cinematic action in the action scenes, describing things and using game mechanics. And the one common problem with the gumshoe system that we've talked about in Night's Black Agent is that your characters, will run out of points and no longer be able to do cool stunts, right? Like run out your gun points, you run out of the preparedness points, you can't pull out a gadget or whatever. One of the ways Swords of the Serpentine solves this is by being very generous with refreshes. You get a point back for every minion, henchman, one hit point goon who is down. There are a lot of ways to restore your points. So you're encouraged to spin big because then you get big returns. Maybe not 100% back, but like it solves the fight very quickly. You defeat your enemies very quickly in a very big, flashy presentation. And it also encourages to use just not sword fighting. You can attack the morale of enemies. You have health and morale, and either one can be defeated through any number of ways. Through sorcery, as we mentioned briefly, but also like through rhetoric, or like you can use, and rhetoric can be like talking them down or using prayers. Like the monster in the end of the adventure we talked about, the flesh tangle, can be defeated with prayers as attacking the morale, because like it's an unholy monster. If you have the right holy words, you can banish it or exorcise it.
When you say the right holy words, given that it's denarii, I can only think of like business speak. It's like, by the power of applied daily interest, I compel thee, be gone by my quarterly earnings, net and gross.
Oh no, it's all about zoning laws. It's like, you're not zoned for that. This is a residential zone. You're an unholy abomination. That's a graveyard. This is the wrong. Anyway, sorry. James.
I was thinking of it more in terms of, we need to properly incentivize this problem, so let's circle back and that kind of nonsense.
Bad synergy.
But what you were saying about the points, Ross, and the generosity with points, I felt that actually as we were playing it. It's fantastic because it drives the story. It allows the story to progress forward. And this is a very story-first game, though it is the GM who is leading the story, because the GM will have the structure of the story, and there are chapters including diagrams of how you run a story. And the diagrams look like old-style D&D dungeons, which is quite cute, I thought. But I have a couple of questions about that. But so many games, not role-playing games, other tabletop games, board games in particular, it's about resource allocation and resource scarcity, and that's what drives the game. And we don't see an awful lot of that in role-playing games as a conscious design decision. We see it, the inheritance
except in
from
Gumshoe.
war game. Except in Gumshoe. And, I mean, D&D, it's hit points, obviously. That is your, the thing that you're trying
and
to
spells per day. Like, the 15-minute day for D&D adventure.
And fate points.
Well, for fate.
Well, but fate points aren't necessarily, fate points in yes, the big yes.
Add your gold.
I can't remember what we covered in the meta-currency episode, but it felt there was an opportunity here to take a very gamist attitude to it, and I would be really interested to tweak the game if I was running it and make it more gamist, so that it's a mercantile city. It's about the resources that you have to hand and optimizing them. Why is the game not playing up to that and going, okay, well, this is what you've got. Maybe you've got the opportunity to get some more, but don't assume there's going to be free refills along the way.
It's the Brindlewood Bay thing of, no. We're not going to give you an actual emulation of a strictly mercantile religious philosophy. We're just going to give you the vibes, the fun vibes, not the actual way that it would brutally play out.
Yeah. Let's see. Aside from your investigative abilities, they also have, just going through the basic mechanics, you have allegiances, which can be spent like investigative abilities, but show who you are allied with, who you can draw favors on. And then, of course, general abilities, which there are only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. The favor
economy, the favor stuff, I thought was nicely done and completely in genre for this kind of setting as well. It's very much about who you can draw on, who you can go back to. And, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but when we come down to the actual city, the description of the city, and there's a fair amount of that in the book as well. It is, as Ross said, a big chunky boy. The one criticism, my primary criticism, is there is nowhere near enough NPCs in this book. There are nowhere near enough characters. If you're in a closed environment like a city, and no, it's not closed, of course, you can go off at any point, but the assumption is that the majority of your action and adventures is going to be within the city and its different overlapping ecosystems. You want to have named characters. You want to have recurring characters. That's the main thing. Characters who come back either because they're useful or because they're a nemesis or because they're funny or a romantic interest. You want these characters to recur. And that's why these settings are so interesting and why they keep reviving in, whether we're talking about Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser or the Thieves' World stuff or the Lies of Loch Lamora, which I have to say I did not get on. I got halfway through it and just went, I am bored. I am not enjoying this. People love it. It's been a huge hit. It features prominently in the resources and bibliography at the back of the book. I think it's the back of the book. As do the original ones. It's the characters. Think about Pratchett as well. What we love about Pratchett is partly the settings, but mostly it's the characters. And your favourite characters come back time and time again. And that was the resource that I don't think is really talked about very much, the potential thing you could draw on. Because I'm British, yes, Pratchett is a huge part of the fantasy landscape over here of the last 20 or 30 years. But the moment you bring that kind of mordant humour to it, and I think it's kind of inevitable. In the playtest we did, as you'll hear, there's a boat chase, a gondola chase, and there was some brilliantly slapstick stuff in there. And had one of the people who had fallen desperately into the water and, or slapped into a pole or whatever it was, recurred in a later fight, that would have been great. That Keystone Cop moment. It's the guy who always gets hit on the head with a pole, getting hit on the head with a pole again. Comedy for me laughter around the table is a huge part of what makes role-playing so enjoyable. Any opportunity you can do to bring that back.
What you're arguing for, James, is the Vampire the Masquerade approach, where there is,
dozens of NPCs all interconnected with each other.
If you want to see a city with a lot of,
like as we did in Chicago by Night,
dozens and dozens and dozens of NPCs, remember reading Chicago by Night.
Oh God, I remember reading Chicago by Night.
I think there is having some named characters would be helpful because the game is very good about making a huge chunk of this book is made up of items and antagonists and adversaries. Well, not generic NPC stat blocks, but also like unique monsters that you can fight. And it's very good about, I read as part of my thing on RPPR, I look through older RPG books. And one of the biggest differences I see between older and newer stuff is how much more gameable newer material is. Like if any random item I read about in Swords of the Serpentine, I could see at least one or two plot hooks I could use as a clue for a scene or the basis of an entire scenario. Like even its description of plate mail plate mail is often decorated and unique to that house or that faction, and so like everyone would recognize who was wearing that plate mail, who they were with. It's like, oh well, I could use that. That's a great scene, to have each plate mail being a unique bespoke thing, as opposed to like something from the 80s or 90s where it's just like, oh, here's some gun stats for this weapon. I'm like, all right, cool. So there is a ton of material that is usable and turnable into scenarios, but like having a section for prominent or not even prominent, but like unique, like what would a cool, interesting fence look like? It would be useful. On the other hand, the book is already 400 pages.
Where is Swords of the Serpentine's Huggy Bear?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And there is one supplement out for it called Brought to Light, which are 4 scenarios. And I think what they're like a lot of Pelgrime Press, Gumshoe system books are going to do is it's going to focus on scenarios because this is still like an investigative thing, and investigative games tend to, based on the strength of their scenarios, right? Given how big the book would be, you'd have to cut something. I don't know what you could cut from this.
Which is a stingy field to plow, I gotta say.
So I don't know what I would cut from this in order to add interesting NPCs. I do agree that interesting NPCs would be useful, but like there's not much dead weight in this book because even the adventure is really good to teach you how to create an adventure for this setting and system, even if you don't run it yourself. Again, all the designer notes for the rules, the gear is really neat because again, it has a lot of cool, like a lot of poisons and diseases in this, which are really good for if you're doing investigative fantasy. Cause like, man, what's a good way to
love that stuff?
Well, it's good for a mystery, right? Like, how did this person die? It's a really weird how they died, right? Like, they sprouted gills and turned blue, and like then they exploded. Well, what poison could that be? Oh, maybe it was 2 poisons. Maybe 2 different guys tried to poison this guy.
You've been hooked. You've been Swords of the Serpentine pilled.
Serpentine
pilled. There, I knew I'd do it.
This section on the city is very well done as well.
What would you cut to get some extra words. I'm like, well, I don't know. You could describe at least one NPC in the 512 words, the 512 uses of will.
Yeah.
That's like half a page.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Well, should we do the 4 questions?
Yeah, sure.
So what it does, my take on what it does is dungeon fantasy, but instead of a physics emulator, the rules are a pulp intrigue emulator with themes replacing grind. That it's, okay, we are going to make this thing, narrativist, and in this way hew closer to the source fiction that had a feeling to it that was not based on a map.
Secrets instead of loot. Like, that's what you're going after. Like, that's the
Yes.
key difference. Yeah. So.
Well, that's succinctly stated. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did I just slam dunk it? Okay.
Yeah.
How does it do it? Gumshoe with the narrative is slang.
It imposes a private eye frame over a traditional fantasy setting and milieu. And there are moments where the two rub against each other in a not entirely comfortable way, but for the most part, it's a pretty easy transition. There's a moment that sprung out for me in character generation where you can assign different numbers of character build points to players depending on the number of players in the party, or the number of characters in the party, and that's a nice way of fixing an existing problem with an existing system of mechanics. I can think of more elegant ways of doing it, but then the system wouldn't be Gumshoe, it would be something else, because I'd be taking it back 2 or 3 steps. So it has the problem of being an existing system of mechanics that was designed for one thing being imposed on another. And I was surprised how well it works for the most part. You have control over your character. You can do all the flamboyant, mad stuff that fans of The Lies of Locke Lamora would want them to do, or Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. But I seem to recall Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser failing more. We did not really fail that much, but it's huge fun. If you were coming from D&D and you were expecting anything like a D&D style adventure, you would not get it from this. This is not a D&D emulator. You would have a hard time. I mean, you could run a standard dungeon bash. It wouldn't be rewarding, because that's not the strength of this game or this setting. Craig?
It's trying to open a can with a fork. If you work hard enough, sure. But that's not what the fork is for, and it's not what the can was designed around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like saying it's the digital software problem of, here's a thing with a chip in it. Can you get it to run Doom? I don't know if you've seen the one where somebody got Doom to run on a digital pregnancy test. That was extraordinary. Link in the show notes. Assuming I can dig it up, it was a few years ago.
Oh, I could find it if you can. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, that would be certainly good.
And I'm kind of getting, could you run S1 Tomb of Horrors using Swords of the Serpentine? Yes, but it's not what it's meant, not what it's designed for. It's not what it's good at.
Again, thinking like D&D is very much like you can do the things that D&D wants you to do. If you try to step out of those, that you try to color outside the lines in D&D, the game is like, no, those options suck. Just keep attacking the monsters. Stop trying to do stunts. They're stupid. This game is like, no, do stunts. Normal combat is stupid. In D&D, you think of the rules first and then figure out how it fits in the fiction. In this, you figure out the fiction and then adjust the rules to fit the concept you had.
Which swings into my answer of who is playing this and how. My guess was D&D fans who realize that narrativism is real. That, people who... Fantasy was the first tabletop role-playing game, so it still has the first mover advantage in the marketplace of ideas. It's still much easier to sell a fantasy game than it is a science fiction game, despite the fact that your fantasy game has competition from all the other fantasy games that were easier to sell than science fiction games. And so, the fact that this is a Gumshoe fantasy game, I can see that if you're a Gumshoe fan, but you're like, I remember having so much fun playing fantasy games back when I was young and my back didn't hurt. But maybe I could do this for that, because I remember there were annoying things that I really didn't like about those physics emulation systems that were really strict. And I've gotten used to this narrativism that indulges my desire to do flamboyant, crazy stuff that does not have a subset of rules permitting it. So I'm like, or this could appeal to fantasy fans who felt that there was a disconnect between their book and simulationist rules. And I haven't played 5e, so I don't know how simulationist it is.
Extremely.
It's still D&D.
Yeah, it's very D&D.
I mean, I will tell you this. The other day I had the thought of, I actually knew Jonathan Tweet back when he was working on D&D 3rd edition, and I'm like, man, what would have happened if he'd asked me to help him with that, and I'd been interested and willing to help him with that. And I'm like, it probably would have wound up that when you make an attack, you roll your d20 and your damage die, and then if you hit, your damage die does damage, but if you miss, it gives you some kind of consolation prize where it's like, okay, but because of how you're positioned, now you're set up to do this follow-up thing, or you get a bonus if you try this other thing, or you get some defensive advantage. I'm like, man, that might actually be onto something. But that's the kind of thing you do in a very gamist situation, or one that's on the gamist, simulationist side of the model. Whereas here, it'll just be like, no, I want to do cool thing. I will pay cool thing points. I will pay my cool thing tax to denarii.
And you can spend enough points, at least most of the time, to guarantee that you succeed. At least the game encourages you to be very creative and open to like, oh yeah, I can definitely use this ability in order to justify this stunt or this action, whatever it is. Of course, my felonious intent allows me to somersault over the guards and stab them in the back, or impress the noble, or whatever it is.
Of course, my spot weakness lets me know who he's secretly in love with.
We should mention a little bit the magic rules, sorcery. There's a sorcery ability, and the game is very specific about how a person can gain magical power. There are a couple different sources, but this is the swords and sorcery genre, not dungeon fantasy per se, in terms of that magic has a horrific cost or a cost. You have to get it either from ancient texts that can erode your mind, or make a pact with some sort of supernatural entity. If you want to do, and you use your sorcery for attacking either health or morale of people without penalty, and that can be dressed up however you want. My character's sorcery theme was uncanny architecture, so I vanished people like they were being sucked into the lament configuration, which was great. Like, they don't have a spell list. They don't have like, here's all the spells you can do. Instead, you pay a corruption cost, which is an investigative ability, and you can describe what your spell does. The problem is corruption is either internalized or mutating your character, or externalized, literally corrupting an area and making it inhospitable for life until it's cleansed. And sometimes you may not ever be able to cleanse it if it's too bad. And of course, this is what gets your character like caught and hunted by the Inquisition, the secret police. Very thematic for a sword and sorcery thing. I like that magic was dangerous to use. Like, if you want to do the cool stuff, there was a risk and or a price to pay. But it was simple too. Like, it's easy to keep in your head. Like, attack for free. If you spend the points, you got to figure out the cost. That's workable and flexible.
Just in terms of the tone of the game writing, I'm like, they did a really nice job of, here's how cool this is at the front, and then a little while, and here's, the terms and conditions that apply.
Just speaking about magic, there was one line that I jotted down from page 141. Sorcery doesn't like being written down, and the writing has a bad habit of becoming sentient. I can do stuff with that. That's great.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Plot hook on a page.
And just tonally for the background. This is not D&D. D&D magic. I'm so tired of D&D magic because it's also utilitarian. It's there to be used and be predictable. Mm-hmm. I want magic that is wild and scary. Every time you cast a spell, I want you to worry that you're brain might leak out of your nose.
Is this the day it happens?
There's entire genres now, like the isekai and the lit RPG genres, that are based on the idea that magic is a reliable and quantifiable, qualitatively describable, like as reliable as physics. It's something you can understand and rely upon. So when magic is as mysterious as a diesel generator, it loses that literal mystique. It doesn't really have the same appeal to it, as opposed to like, yeah, the writing might turn into something sentient and kill you, or crawl off the page like a centipede, or even something even worse. Like, yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And I think it's the idea of magic as predictable force it's kind of where so much mainstream fantasy has got to, and Harry Potter, I lay a huge amount of the blame at Harry Potter. The idea that you could teach this stuff to 8-year-olds. No, absolutely not. It's one of my back burner projects that I'll never get around to is the setting where there's a reason they're teaching their 8-year-olds, and it's not a good reason at all. The 8-year-olds are basically, they're using them. It's like that moment in the Matrix where Morpheus shows Neo the Duracell battery. That's what humans are. That's what 8-year-old mages are. They're a power source, nothing more. Magic should be at the very least mysterious. And I go back to most people's very first experience of magic, which is a magic show at a birthday party when you're 5 or 6. And it is the coolest thing in the world. And you look back on it now, it's like, okay, I could do I know how every single one of those tricks works. I could do at least a third of them with very little preparation. But at the time, it's like, oh my God, there's a new dimension to this stuff. How does this work? And if games don't capture that or don't aspire to capture that in their magic, and I think Swords of the Serpentine really does, then I think they are just missing a trick. And I don't know why players don't demand that. Or I think, yes, because players want to be powerful. They want to be able to do the cool stuff. But that's not, treating a fireball as repeatable as firing off a bullet from a sniper rifle. Not a fireball, that would be a lightning bolt. But anyway, but Swords lets you be powerful in different ways. It lets you do the cool stuff, but the cool stuff is different every time. Yeah, it's not
exactly.
Well, they had the example of, the character who maxed out command in the playtest. They're like, let's just see what happens if I'm an edge case where I am the most commanding person and they're like, yeah, this guy wasn't a big fighter, but if he looked you in the eye and said, you don't want to mess with me, you would sort of visibly fall back. And that they're like, yeah. And it was great because everybody wanted him to lead whatever they were doing. And he was in constant demand to, no, lead our uprising. You will be our new king. Man, I don't want to be a new king. And, you could do the same thing with, what was it? I'm like, you could take Taunt 5 and be a Jeremy Piven character.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to build a character. Like I said, the ridiculous luck is just like, the dude from the Big Lebowski. He's just wandering through life, getting by through sheer luck. Again, D&D has sort of trained generations of gamers at this point to like treat role-playing as a fun word problem solving exercise, right? Like it's playing a physics puzzle video game like Portal. It's like, how can I have these powers and how can I use them? All I have is a hammer shaped like a cloud kill spell. How can I solve everything in my life with cloud kill? And going from there, or fireball, or whatever it is. But this is not that game. This is the opposite, which is magic is something weird. Yeah.
Let's be real, Ross. It's going to be cloud kill.
Well, yeah, but there's different ways. Yeah. I really like the example adventure they have that illustrates a lot of like how the game is supposed to work mechanically and thematically. It's called Corpse Astray, chapter 11. It's about a 30-page adventure, and it's actually, I forgot what movie it is. It's inspired by an old murder movie.
I was going to say Weekend at Bernie's.
No, it's like something Coronet. It's like a movie from the 40s. And it's essentially about a poor person who is very mad at a rich family. Like he was and so he wants to get revenge on this rich family. In the movie, the person just kills like 8 members of the family.
You're thinking of Kind Hearts and Coronets?
Yes, Kind Hearts and Coronets, yeah.
Okay, he's not a poor person. He is a member of the family. He's wiping out everyone above him in the hierarchy in order to inherit the title.
That's it.
But yes, it's a work of... Alec Guinness plays all the other members of the family.
That's...
Did you not know that?
No, I've not seen it. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, it is fantastic. It's one of the great Ealing comedies. It is truly great.
Awesome. And so in this thing, he's wanting to kill everyone in the family, and he could, if he does kill everybody in the family, he would stand to inherit. The inciting incident is they wouldn't let him inter his dead mother in the family crypt because she was disowned. He gets a book of evil black magic, gets corrupted by it, and decides to make a flesh tangle, which, as I mentioned, is a horrible undead monster. Players are here, and what I really like is the first action scene is just the players are on a ship going into Eversink, and then they're attacked by pirates. And there's so many different ways to resolve this attack with pirates. You can literally just fight them off. You can flirt with the captain and impress her enough to have her back off. You could use your ridiculous luck to aid in that. It gives you a lot of advice on how to handle this very swashbuckling scene. But then the players get roped into this whole mystery of like, why are the corpses being taken away by not the official corpse takers? Who's plundering these corpses? Going in from there. But the adventure has a lot of advice on how to run this, and like showcases like chase mechanics, fight mechanics, and investigation mechanics, and a little like, cosmic horror. Like, here's a giant flesh monster that's going to rampage through the city and kill a lot of people unless you can stop it.
Sounds more like body horror.
Okay, body horror. I mean, it's from a controlled by spirit from beyond or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, tomato. I
gotta nitpick this. Which reminds me, when you were talking about using the chase mechanics, I thought the chase mechanics were fine, but it made me wonder what game has the best chase mechanics. Has there been really a sort of, oh well, that's the one to beat?
We can rule out James Bond. I'll say that.
I always quite enjoyed the one in the original Star Wars, which was kind of a dogfighting mechanic, except it was simply about how far apart are your two ships? Are you gaining on them? Are you getting further away?
Mm-hmm.
And that it simplified the whole thing. Fantastic. And then you could just throw in asteroids and stuff in the way. It was a very simple, very narrative chase thing. And then they expanded it and did board games, and yeah, it kind of lost the magic. That's the only one that comes to mind. I mean, it was endlessly usable. It was it wasn't an exciting system, but it was easy to remember the rules and how it all worked.
I'm like, is this, has that yet to be written?
That's a topic for our next live stream, perhaps. Talking about chase systems and RPGs.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
So we talk about the mechanics, we talk about the amount of lore this game has. It is a very dense game in terms of the amount of setting information you have.
Dense, but not picky.
Yeah.
It's not one of the games where you've got that guy who's in your group and has read everything and retained it, where he won't be going, actually, you can't do that because of this thing. It's got a lot of lore that is meant as prompts that you then fill in rather than as things that, it liberates rather than containing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they talk about like just the legal system and every other thing. They talk about so many different aspects of it, but like everything is designed as, again, to be playable, to give plot hooks. And they give a canonical answer to like every single little detail. So it's easy for you to create a new, committee in the city government, or to have someone create some sort of exception for your adventure. So like, plot hook. Yeah, they literally have sections like, the plot hook that tangles, Denari helps the drunk noble, and because no locals are going to help him for sure. And so like all these like, here's just a little something you could use. Just again, one of these great RPGs to just open a random page and read, and like, that's neat. That's useful.
Yeah. So much good stuff in that. Yeah. I mean, there's some stuff that I wouldn't use. I mean, they're from little stuff like the winged apes that just didn't seem, winged gorillas. I'm unconvinced. They just didn't seem to fit within the world that had been built, but that's a minor thing. Up to the interrelationships of the different power blocks between the cities, I'd have liked that to be more. I'd have drawn a massive Venn diagram is what I would have done. But then this is not my book. I had my book. I was the editor on Marienburg, and we did that stuff in, admittedly, 25 years ago. Bloody hell. So, I mean, the one thing that I felt didn't really work for me is the stuff on the city is great, but then it goes into the world around. And this, for me, is not a game where you're going to be spending much time outside the city. And when you are, it's going to be kind of vague and nebulous. And yes, you need places that people are going to have come from, but I don't think it needs that degree of building out the world. because if I were playing this, I would not be thinking of a campaign, or if I was, it would be a short campaign. I think this is a brilliant, brilliant game for one-shots, or a session of one-shots with repeated characters. I think you could have so much fun with that. I think this is an ideal game for those evenings where one or two players cancel at short notice and you go, well, what are we going to play? Let's play Swords. Let's let's spend 3 or 4 hours just larking about on the rooftops of this mad city, mad and very dangerous city, stealing stuff, essentially.
Dirtbag Venice.
Dirtbag Venice. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing that occurred to me is I'd probably just set it in Venice because I love Venice, and Venice had so much mad stuff going on. The power blocks and the corruption and all of it. So much fun. And then influence from outside as well. But I have my mental map. I've looked at that map. The map of Eversink is really pretty and really well done. Yes. And I can't summon it to mind. But I can summon the map of Venice to mind because, I think about Venice quite a bit.
Is a Pelgrane product going to have bad maps? I mean, they started out selling map software, right? Did I imagine that?
They don't use the map software to make the maps for their games for the most part, I believe. I think the maps are all hand done, and it shows. They're gorgeous.
Yeah, they are very good maps. Yeah.
I would not be surprised if they did first drafts on the computer and then handed that to an artist and be like, okay, now make look pretty now. Off you go. Which, I mean, that's how I do it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a game that, despite the amount of lore and in-depth description of the cities and the sort of monsters and things you can encounter, this is a system that you could easily adjust to run in other settings, I would say. Like, as long as it's in the sword and sorcery genre or adjacent to it, right? Like, a fantastic Venice where magic is real would be easy to house rule. You just have to change your allegiances and factions about, like, which one-player characters could do. And then talk a little bit about, like, corruption. You could either make it, like, what people thought magic was back in that, in the Renaissance or something else. It would be easy to do this in Freeport or Warhammer Fantasy version of this, if you didn't like the Warhammer
or
Fantasy
Chicago
system.
by Night.
Chicago by Night, that would be harder to do because I feel this is pretty tied to swords and sorcery per se. Adding gunfire and cell phones. Guns and cell phones would make this a little more difficult.
They're just magic items.
Can you imagine an investigative skill that's just cell phone?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure that should be the next Gumshoe game, I thought about that as well.
Did either of you ever read the short game Millennials Are Killing?
Mm-mm.
No.
Oh, man. Because you've seen all these articles about, millennials are killing the hospitality industry, and millennials are killing porn, and millennials are killing...
Well, now it's Gen Z is killing things. Gen Z is killing slow dancing right now, I read recently. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so you had two stats, and one was, your young, strong, uncorrupted body, and the other was your cell phone and your ability to use gadgets. And you would get some random assignment. It's like, okay, describe how you and your posse of millennials are killing bowling, or, how you're killing traditional Sunday dinners with the family.
No, that could be fun.
Yes, millennials are killing.
Yeah, I think this is pretty tied to this very specific feel of fantasy. One of the things I've been doing podcast RPG so long, there are times where I'm like, man, where was this system 10 years ago? Like, I remember running a campaign for RPPR called Forces of War. It was set in the Iron Hero. I used the Iron Heroes system, which was a third ed D&D hack from Mike Merles that was like martial characters only. It had stunting mechanics, and every character was, some sort of fighting style. No one had magic. And because I wanted a Conan the Barbarian swords and sorcery field. But if I had this game, I wouldn't have used Iron Heroes. I would have used Swords and Serpentine, because that, even with the magic here, does not feel like D&D magic. The problem with magic in D&D is spellcasting characters overshadow martial characters. And this is a common thing, especially in third ed and fifth ed, where like, I'll just oh, okay, we have to get the castle. I'll just cast fly and go to the parapets. You then go down and open the doors for you. Or I'm just going to turn invisible and fly and solve all our problems by casting fireballs from 400 feet up. And Swords of Serpentine, you can't really do that without turning into a mutant or, corrupting a city block. And so characters feel like you're in a fantasy setting, but characters don't have that superhero feeling that you get with mid and high level D&D characters. So, yeah.
As an aside, that raises a horrific, question about siege stuff. It's like, oh, wow, you're in your castle. Well, maybe I'll just come to right outside your castle and do a bunch of horrific corrupting spells to get inside your castle. And now, oh, where am I going to put my corruption? I guess inside your castle. Oops. Did I make your ancestral home?
You're not taking anything. You just corrupted it, man. You just ruined it for yourself. So, that's sort of the downside of that, I would imagine. If you're not interested in keeping the castle for yourself.
If you're motivated by theft, sure. If you're motivated by vendetta.
Mm-hmm. I mean, probably also the church and other institutions those guys, they're corrupting everywhere in the countryside. We got to deal with those. That could be a problem.
Yeah. That's a problem for future evil wizard Greg. I don't envy that guy.
That could be a plot hook for a campaign. Is we got to kill this evil siege wizard. Yeah, he's been corrupting the countryside. James, any final thoughts on any topics on Swords of the Serpentine we haven't covered yet that you would like to?
It's not often that, we should say we got PDFs of the rulebook from Pelgrane as review copies. It's not often that I say this is a book I'm going to go and buy in hardback, but I'm going to get a copy of this in hardback because it's a delight to read. And I can see myself actually, as I said, running a one shot at a time when the game that we were otherwise going to play for whatever reason is not going to happen. It's a heavily modified Gumshoe, but fundamentally it's Gumshoe. If you know Gumshoe, you'll be able to run this. You don't have to memorize all the details of the city. You just have to remember enough of the cool stuff to make the game cool. I mean, it's in a well-trodden tradition, but I think this is definitely one of the high points. Back when it came out, I mentioned Thieves. I mean, there were a bunch of early attempts to do that kind of scurrilous city. There was a thing called Haven, Free City of Haven, I think, which I had a copy of and can remember nothing about, except it was loose bound and you had to find your own folder for it. Three Hole Punched, I think.
Wow.
A whole bunch of others. This, I think, is a high point of the genre within fantasy gaming. If you wanted to run a Lankmar-style game or a Lies of Locke Lamora-style game, this is where I would point you. And it won't be exactly that. It has its own flavour. But you will have so much fun with this that it won't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, thinking about The Big Lebowski, but in Eversink, it's dude, they corrupted your rug, man. Yeah, it really tied the room together as they're at a tavern bowling, and you got to get your rug uncorrupted, and that's the whole adventure. Boy, this is gonna fester in my brain until I do something about that, isn't it? Greg, any final thoughts?
I mean, I hate to end on a cavil like this, but if you're gonna reference the smell of shit in the first paragraph, just call it shit.
That's fine.
Other than that, yeah, good game. Achieving what a lot of people have been trying to get to without maybe being able to state why they couldn't quite get there. So this does feel like it knows what it's doing and why, and has got a good grip on the how.
Excellent point. So yeah, check out Swords of the Serpentine, available now. And there's one adventure for it. They're probably doing some more books for it. Thank you all so much for listening. Our next episode is going to be our final review episode of the season. And this is going to be Greg's choice.
Oh, man.
Yes. Going to be looking at Dialect.
I should get this played.
Yes, a storytelling game about language, how it is created and how it is lost. That is a very interesting choice. Thank you, Greg. And then, of course, we have two actual plays, one of which is already recorded, which is Swords of the Serpentine. And then we are working on another one where we're going to be playing The Quiet Year on a live stream with a white.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. We should have a guest. Well, hopefully we'll have a guest for that. Then that'll be season 3 wrapped up. I'll get the zine out and then we'll... you should stay tuned for info on season 4. Hopefully by the time you hear this, we've figured out the plans for that. So you got a bit. Yeah, we're recording this in February. Just time stamping this now. But yeah, we'll see when this comes out. But thank you all so much for listening. Talk about this on our Discord. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Bye.